Five, four, three. We're live. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us once again on the Hurt for the Hurting platform. And we have special guests that are here today. We have tapped into the mind of intelligence and academia on this wonderful Wednesday to talk about a subject that is relevant to each and every one of us. We're here to learn, we're here to listen, we're here to be able to talk about things that in our culture we do not talk transparently and upfront enough. And we couldn't have more of a special group of women here. And they're going to solicit you to the article which they wrote that spurred this conversation, but also all the other work and resources that they will have available to ensure that you're fully equipped in everything that we talk about today. So let me just begin by saying to each of you, thank you again for joining us here. And I'm going to start with Dr. Marsh. Just take a moment, introduce yourself, and then Professor Chaney, you can go after that. And then LaToya, hold us down and close us out, and then we'll get right into the article. Thank you so much again for listening. Let me say to those that are listening, like the page, share it now. Let everybody know that we are on. If you're on, if you can go on Instagram, let people know. Share this page, share this page, share this page. Dr. Marsh.
Thank you, Pastor Hurt. It's such a pleasure to be with you today. I'm from Los Angeles, and I think we met at the Travis Smiley State of Black America, like in 2020. 2000. So I've known you for almost 20 years now.
Wow.
I think that's where we met. We'll have to talk about that. I'm a sociologist, did my PhD at the University of Southern California, then did a postdoc at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I joined the faculty at the University of Maryland in '08. I was tenured in 14. I was also a Fulbright Scholar in South Africa 2017. I am in the process of writing a book right now. The book is called The Love Jones Cohort, Those That Are Single and Living Alone in the Black Middle Class. And most of my research hinges on understanding the Black middle class, understanding avenues into the Black middle class, and consequences of being in the Black middle class.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that, Professor Chaney.
I am Cassandra Chaney. I am a professor in child and family studies at Louisiana State University. I did my graduate work. I'm an HBCU alumni from Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. In psychology, I did my graduate work at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. In human development and family studies, I have been on the faculty of LSU since 2006. I was tenured in 2012, and last year I became a full professor of child and family studies last year. My research broadly looks at the experiences of African Americans in the United States, and under that umbrella, I look at, so for example, narratives related to emotional closeness and commitment among cohabiting, dating, married couples. I look at long-term stable marriages. I also look at the influence of religiosity and spirituality in the lives of African Americans, both from a historical and contemporary perspective. I would say for about the past 7 years, my work has really veered toward looking at police violence against Black bodies. So a good friend and colleague of mine, Ray Robertson, we actually released a book on police brutality, excessive force among African Americans, historical and contemporary antecedents of police violence. That book was actually released during September of last year.
Wow. LaToya.
Hi, everyone. My name is LaToya Council. I am a graduate student at the University of Southern California in sociology, and I study Black middle class couples, marriage, family, and working family life. Specifically, how do couples manage individual health and wellness while trying to take care of their relationships, take care of their children, and work a 9-to-5 job. So my dissertation is titled Her Work, His Work, Their Work, Time and Self-Care in Black Middle Class Couples.
Wow, listen, we could have each of you back just one-on-one to dive into so many subjects that you hit. We feel especially honored to have you here. Now we're going to take one word out the title, but I'm going to let Dr. Marsh introduce the title to us of the article that spurred this conversation. We want to get fully a credit on our YouTube channel, so we don't want to take any chances. But then we don't want to go to Facebook jail. So, but even though we'll be okay, tell us about the article. Tell us what spurred you all to come together and have that conversation, and then if we could go around the same way, starting with Professor Chaney, Dr. Chaney, all the way to soon-to-be Dr. Counsel to tell their perspective on the article as well.
Well, okay, Julie, so let me Pastor Hurt, let me tell you how the title kind of came up. And it's funny because I was talking to LaToya. So LaToya, can you please change the title a little bit? Because I don't want to get a spanking from my mother. I don't want to get beat because I don't put some words in here. Take one of the letters out and just put a symbol instead. But so we had written the article and we were trying to figure out where we wanted to publish it. And so I have a friend who used to work at CNN. And I emailed him and I said, hey, I was like, let me know what you think about the article, where you think we should publish it. And then he said, hey, I think I got a really catchy title for you. And I was like, okay. So I'm still on the phone with him and I'm texting LaToya, like, LaToya, what do you think about this title? So she was like, I love it. It sounds great. So we decided to go with the title. Once we published it, we changed it so it's a symbol instead of actually using the word. But that's kind of like how we got to the title. I think it makes a lot of sense for LaToya to kind of say how the article actually came to be, because it really is her brainchild. So I'm going to just stop with the title and then let LaToya tell more about like how the article came to be.
Absolutely. LaToya.
Yes, so the article came to be because I watched Jada and Will's sit down, tell all about what happened when they were separated, and her speaking about needing to fix, people and fix her and needing to feel good. And I was like, wow, I appreciate Jada being vulnerable and expressing this, because I know she's not the only one. And I actually saw some of that in myself. But so I was really interested at that point, but really what made me go, okay, let's write this article is the feedback. I was on Black Twitter and Instagram, and just the way people were treating Jada. Like, she didn't think about the third party. She didn't think about August Alsina. She just used him because she was lonely and hurting. And he's the one who really was affected by this. And I get that, and I agree with that, right? It's this idea of, yes, August Alsina was dealing with some very challenging things in his life, and he was going through many challenging things. But what Jada was hinting at is this idea that oftentimes Black women are put in this position to be fixers, to have to fix people, even when they're not asked to fix people. It's just this unquestioned assignment that we place on ourselves, and that others within our communities and outside of our communities place on us as well. So I was like, hey, let me work with scholars who I know do work on Black families, Black couples, Black middle class, Black elites, and relationships, where we can really talk about what it is that Jada is saying when she said, I needed to feel good about fixing. And then while we were doing that, the Megan Thee Stallion thing happened, where she was a victim of, I don't know if it's intimate partner violence, but she was a victim of violence at the hands of a man. And people were laughing at what happened to her and mocking the situation. So it's like, we really need to have a conversation about Black women and how our bodies and our humanities are not really respected fully as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And that was wonderful. Professor Chaney, tell us, as you were hearing LaToya talk, and what came to your mind from your years of expertise and experience, and how you could bring a sense of levity to the conversation.
I first want to say how much I enjoyed working with LaToya, on this project. And I want to mention to Dr. Marsh, my mother's not seen the title either. Yes, she's gonna good and relaxed, so she'll probably stumble on it, but from someone else, not from me. I had so many in actually doing research in terms of interviewing stable Black couples. And I would say in the next 2 years, I plan on writing a book on a lot of these narratives that I actually got from stably married Black couples. And this was actually in 2004. But even more recently, I did something related to stable Black marriages. And these were couples that had been married on average for at least 20 years. So I think the thing that resonated with me with the Will and Jada and August Alsina situation is that we're looking at a relationship that is a stable marriage, right? So it is a long-term, marriage where both parties have made it clear in interviews that they have no plans on leaving each other. In fact, Will and Jada have even said, we don't even call ourselves married anymore. We call ourselves life partners. So I think in terms of their sit down at the red table talk, I think for a lot of Black people, for the first time, it made them realize, for one, is this really what happens in stable marriages, right? So is there always some third party involved? And then secondly, if there is, how do these couples negotiate in terms of how do we get over this, what is seemingly an unsurmountable hurdle in terms of their relationship? So I actually give Will and Jada a lot of credit, being very, very public people, to actually have to bring out something so very private. Also was the way it came out. It seemed to me as if Will and Jada had actually come to peace with this. It wasn't like Will was totally taken off guard by the situation. This is actually based on the comments made by August Alsina, as well as what he himself made during that interview. But a lot of people had a lot to say about Jada, but I noticed very few comments were directed at August Alsina. So I'll kind of end it there in terms of all of the weight being placed on Jada, very little on August Alsina.
Well, let me pick up on something you said, and then I'm definitely going to bring our other experts in here. Is this what marriage really looked like? And I think a reason why it became such a punchline and joke into many people, in my perspective, was it was a deflection. It was a deflection of, here's an opportunity for me to pick on someone else that's dealing with something that we all deal with in human relationships, with is letting each other down, disappointments, privacy, things that we only want to talk about amongst those that was relevant to. Quite frankly, their relationship is none of our business unless we're coming in to evolve it and help it. So just from your expertise and hearing that commentary, what is your thoughts on that? And certainly we're going to have the rest of our experts speak as well.
I think, Pastor Hurt, you actually bring out a very, 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 very good point here, that this was a very private issue that actually now had become public. And for the marriages that have actually been long-standing, those that have 20, 30, 40, 50 plus years, the unspoken truth is that happens in more marriages than what people admit to, right? And I think because of Will and Jada's celebrity, I think they automatically have this burden of being perfect, right? So some of that is, I think, those of us in the public, especially, they along with Denzel and Pauletta and Samuel Jackson and LaToya Richardson, right? They are this beacon of Black love, but that Black love and at times could actually be not perfect, right? So I think that something that the public has to deal with, that this couple was forced, right? Remember, based on what August really outed the relationship, brought it back to the forefront, right? But this is something that Will and Jada had already come to terms with between themselves as a couple.
Dr. Marsh, come in here and talk to us a little bit about this from the lenses of the strong Black woman concept that you all brought up in the article, and how that plays into this and even your perspective on how that can be avoided in the future.
Right. So there's a couple things about the Will and Jada experience. One, we don't know the experience. So we really can't comment on their relationship because they showed us what they wanted us to see. So one of the reasons why when LaToya asked if I wanted to write this with her, I was like, absolutely, because we're having conversations on somebody's relationship, but we're only somebody's relationship, but we're only seeing what they allowed us to see. And now you have this little blip in the relationship, and now everybody wants to come out and talk about the relationship. But I too, like LaToya, was kind of on social media, and people were sending me the video and everything. And one of the things that kept coming up is this whole notion about like a ride and die. And when they brought the notion of the ride and die, I was like, okay, I think that's a toxic idea. And unless we unpack this from a sociological perspective or from an academic perspective, people are still going to reinforce kind of ride and die ideology. And so I don't know if it's ride or die or ride and die. We can talk about that. But so me and my friends always argue. I'm like, I shouldn't ride and die. And why would you? I'm going to die with you. It shouldn't be or, but I digress. Here's the point. If you're thinking about a ride and die, and your ride and die is to say, hey, you know what? I can rob, steal, kill, lie, cheat, and this person is going to stay with me. That's not ride and die. That's an unhealthy relationship. You need to think about the toxicity of that relationship. If you're saying that I'm going to evolve as a person, no matter what I become, I'm going to change over 20 years, this person's going to love all 20 versions of me, that is a ride and die. But if you think you just because someone is abusing you and taking advantage of you and you're staying, that makes you a strong Black woman or a down chick or a down dude, you got to kind of look at yourself and say, what do I think I deserve? Do I expect you to lie to me? Do I expect you to cheat on me? Do I expect you to have these constant kind of character conversation? So when I heard them talk about ride and die, because I think in Will and Jada's, at the end of their close, they said, we ride together, we die together, partners for life or something. And that's a play on the words, I guess, bad boy. But people turn that quickly into ride and die. And I was like, no, we've got to have this conversation. And there's got to be a space where Black women are allowed to be like vulnerable, be like, I'm not going to deal with this. You think you can give all of this to me and I'm supposed to take it, so I'm a strong Black woman, but I am a strong Black woman. Because I am a strong Black woman, I'm setting my boundaries. And I'm not doing emotional work for you. I was like, the best thing that you can do for someone is say, you know what, go get some help. I see a therapist every Monday morning. Every Monday morning. And when you take the stigma out of Black America too, where you don't talk about your mental health. I have a mental health Monday. Every Monday I see my therapist. Anybody in a relationship where the person doesn't want you to see a therapist, understand they want to keep you where you are because they're probably oppressing you in one way or another. And they don't want you to see a mental health therapist or a mental health specialist. Because once you do, and you understand your boundaries and you understand who you are, you're not going to be that ride and die that takes all of that abuse.
All right.
And I'm absolutely not going to take this.
Absolutely. Listen, if you could do something with your system, because we want to hear you. You're saying so much truth. I think there's a little echo coming from you on you there. If you got something on, maybe something, you got it on another apparatus or something on over there. If not, maybe it'll work itself out here in a second. LaToya, talk to us not just about what Dr. Marsh said, because she opened up a great bag of worms there, stigma of mental health in our community, and the need for us to take advantage of what others have been taking advantage of so many years. It's time for us to tap into that. Our church, we just hired a behavior counselor on our staff formally to A, kill that stigma, but B, to have a system in place where people can turn to. Because I often tell with them, they think I'm joking, I'm being serious. Pastors are not counselors. We hear you and we say, yeah, what? You telling me? No, they ain't do that, did they? Well, let's pray. All right, that's the bulk of it. That's not our expertise. We would love to pray and dialogue and give perspective, but for most of the things that people come to us for, it needs to be people like yourself that's been schooled, trained in these areas that can outsource them and know, hey, this is on this level. Do you need to get something professional? Even if you have to be in, like we see with our dear sister Tamar, if you have to go and be put away for a while, that stigma needs to be gone away, because all of us at some point in our life probably needed that at some point. But LaToya, talk to us, soon to be Dr. Counsel, talk to us about how all this framework fits into what you're studying and what you've heard us talk about thus far in this conversation.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you for that, Pastor Hurt. Yeah, so there is stigma, right, into going to seek a professional marriage and family therapist for your relationship. But the strong Black woman fits into my research well because I study work and family life, right? And I noticed that even with the women and the fathers that I interviewed, the level of the ability to be vulnerable and say, I need to take a break, right? It's not really there. And so what do I mean by that? Well, many of my moms, I call them my moms, they would say, my husband doesn't clean the dishes right, so I'll just do it to make sure it's done the way that I want it to be done. Because I know if I do it, it will be done the right way. And so instead of saying, well, why not ask him to do the dishes again? Why take on more work in your marriage, in your relationship? Like, why just not ask him to just do it? And no one can give me an answer as to why. And that's why it's so important to understand how the controlling image of the strong Black woman comes up into our relationships. She's a positive image, yes, right? Because it's a positive of the other images that play Black women, right? You got the Hottentot and Venus. You have the beyond the J-Lo bootylicious stereotype, right? You have the welfare queen. Those were all that were brought into the Black community by white supremacy to control and contain our bodies, our humanities. So the strong Black woman is about being a Black middle class, came out of Black middle class respectability as no, we are women who can hold things, we can shoulder things. Her counterpart for Black men is the Black family patriarch, right? This idea of Black men are protectors and leaders and providers in their families. And while these images are positive and were built to show we are quote unquote normal families, they've put couples in this situation where there's no flexibility. Where can you really fully get to vulnerability with each other, where I call it the bare bones, and do that work of love where you can say, hey, I am tired and I really need you to do the dishes, and please pay attention to how you're doing the dishes. I can't take on more dishes. Or he say, hey, I'm really not happy in this job, but I know it's important for my family that I'm working, but this job is killing me. Can I have that flexibility to maybe take time to switch to another career? Now, we also know that economic constraints are at play, right? Like that's not that easily said as done. But I think that if we move towards allowing couples where we recognize these images and how they show up in our relationships and starting to notice that is a way that we can start to combat some of these things and move towards a marriage and family therapist and other experts who can give us those tools to navigate strong Black woman and Black family patriarch.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that, Professor Chaney. It seems like you got something to say there. I read body language. Come on in. Military trained.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. And there is one thing that I think it's so important as it relates. It's especially what Dr. Marsh was saying about the importance of making sure that you are healthy. There have been like 3 times when a group of young Black single mothers have actually come on the campus of LSU. And in my dialogues with these women, many of, all of whom have children, some have actually 2 or 3 children. They're all under the age of 20. And it's really, really like jarring for me to hear them say things like their boyfriend, their child's father calls them out of their name, or he puts his hands on them, and they make comments like, yeah, but all relationships go through that, and all women are called out of their name. And it's like I have to educate them that is not true, right? Just because these are the type of men that you are currently dealing with, A, does not mean that all men are that way, because that is not true. And B, more importantly, you have to take some agency in terms of, why am I selecting people that are abusive, right? So sometimes I've heard women say that, but every guy that I meet is verbally abusive, or every guy that I meet is physically abusive, or every guy that I meet does not want to work or take responsibility for his own actions. So I believe in turning it inward, not always looking outward. So a lot of that is actually doing the work, doing the mental work, the psychological work that you need to make sure that you are well first. So, I mean, imagine when we're on a plane, the first thing during turbulence, the first thing that comes over the intercom is to make sure that you have your seatbelt on first, and then you can help the person next to you, right? Because you are totally ineffective if you are not in a safe space yourself. So one of the things I especially see in my work with couples who are cohabiting, is that many of them want a happy relationship, even for the ones that have been married, but they don't really know exactly how to get there. And it makes perfect sense when you look at, now the stats are over 70% of Black children are reared, right, to single mother-headed households, which means that's not to say that these mothers do not have like a large body of networks from which they can draw financially, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, but in terms of relationship health in the form of marriage, that is something that as a group, as Black people, we do not have. But what's interesting is that we have a higher desire for marriage, but our expectations of having a happy marriage does not align with our desire. So we want it, we just don't know exactly how to get it. So I think the Will and Jada situation, I like that it came out in the sense that for the first time we're looking at, people are talking about relationship dynamics. Now, of course, they're in the elite, right? Part of the Black class kind of specter, but even in terms of our relationships, in terms of the level of honesty, what is and is not appropriate in terms of our relationships, what we will and will not accept in a relationship. All of those things are conversations that we're now having because of that very instrumental red table talk between them.
Thank you.
George,
Dr. Marsh?
is my sound better?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, so there are a couple of points.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to add a couple of points. I appreciate the fact that you all have a mental health specialist on staff now. That's important, especially in the Black church, because I don't think we're where we need to be there. The other thing that I think is really important, we have to ask ourselves, why are we getting married? Why are you actually getting married? And I don't think we stop enough and say, why am I getting married? Is it out of this notion of like respectability politics where I'm supposed to be married, I'm supposed to have a partner, I'm supposed to have 2.5 kids, and I'm supposed to have a black picket fence? So this is like the notion of like, have made it. But in doing that, if you're doing that to just get the picture of like having made it, what are you willing to sacrifice? And what are you willing to give up to adhere to those respectability politics? Because you can be married, but are you in a happy marriage? Are you in a marriage that's fulfilling? Are you in a marriage that you guys are building together, building a legacy together? Or are you just able to check the box to say that you're married? So especially right now in the middle of COVID, we have to ask those really, really important questions. And people that are like single too, right? So like, would you rather be alone or wish that you were alone? Why are people actually getting married? We got to have a conversation about that. And see, what I think what we're doing is we're getting to some of my research where when you're single, there's a certain level of a stigma that's associated with you because you're single, because you haven't in some ways followed those respectability politics. In some ways, you kind of challenge them. So I'm getting at the notion about like singlehood as well. But yeah, it's like I'd much rather ask that question, like, or do you want to be alone or wish that you were alone? Why are people actually getting married?
Well, Dick, go a little bit deeper. You've done the research. You're here. Talk to us a little bit more about what you found out in your studies.
Right. So what we're finding out is that people who are single or single and living alone, they're okay with themselves. They're okay with not being married. Sometimes they might get a little lonely, but they build really good friendship networks and their family means a lot to them. So they're able to survive. But yes, they will tell you over and over again, people stigmatize me. I can have an advanced degree. I can own my own home. I can have my own car. I can have my own business. But someone's ultimately going to say, why aren't you married? And when are you getting married? So everything else that a person has done doesn't matter unless they're not partnered. And if some people aren't careful, they'll think, let me just get partnered, but you'll get partnered with the wrong person. And that person will be using you and abusing you. But just for the sake of checking the box, you're now in that relationship. And we got to change the narrative. And thinking about the Black church has ministries for singlehood, but they don't talk about dealing with the whole person like Cassandra is talking about. They talk about how to stay saved and not have sex, how to stay single and saved. But what about the individual person? What about making that individual whole first in these single ministries? What about thinking about doing stuff as an individual? What about thinking about having like wealth management people come in? Think about the wealth you can build as a single person. Why not have mental health people come in and talk about you as a single person? What we get from the Black church for the most part is like how to live saved as a single person.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we get that either.
When they had the singles ministry, that's what we got.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'll speak to that. And there's a rhyme and reason behind that. It has to do with the structure. And so when you have structure that at the top wants the picture, so there's no vulnerability from the top. And so you can't expect that to sprinkle down to beneath. And so if, there's churches that will not even take a resume from a single pastor. So when you have that, and people buy into it, and, this is off the record, nobody I tell you that some of the most unhappy marriages that you can see is those that are in the household of pastors, because a lot of times it's no fault of either party, but they were rushed/forced into it to fit that dimension to be able to fulfill that passion and that dream to that. Dr. Counsel, I'm going ahead and give you your doctorate. I'm tired of
yeah.
Those
things are not as though they are. Yeah.
USC, you moving too slow. Okay, Hurt for the Hurdy has indoctrinated LaToya. All right, Dr. Counsel, you brought up something I want you to dig into, and then we want our rest of our experts to get into this as well. Talk about the role of television, some of the historical sitcoms, and how that plays a role into it, and how we've seen that evolve or devolve depending on who's critiquing it, in this conversation that we're having.
Yes, television has played a huge role in what we see going on, and I think couples as well, right? I just actually finished this article about You Ain't Denzel by Armand Perry, and Dr. Armand Perry and Dr. Derek Brooms actually talked about like men looking at media and Black men in media and their ideas about romantic relationships and marriage. And so that just goes to say, right? Like, I mean, you have the Cosby Show before what happened, right? The Cosby Show was a big example of Black middle class. You made it. Not only did you make it into the middle class, but you made it as a Black person, right? You're married, you have the married appearance, they have their kids, they're professionals. Even among Black working class individuals, right? You had good times, right? James and Laura Evans, right? Like they were married, they had a family. She was a stay-at-home mom at some point. He went out and worked, right? Yes, Claire and Cliff both worked, but the idea was marriage is a thing. Like you get married, you have these relationships, and moms do a lot of the work at home, even with dads helping in, because we did see these dads helping in, helping out. Even like current, right? You have Blackish, right? You have the couple living in Los Angeles with their children, right? So this idea of, I think it goes exactly with what Dr. Marsh was saying, the respectability politics, why we need to question why marriage needs to happen. And we have these examples of what marriages are supposed to look like from the media. We also have these examples in social movements, right? Two of the most famous civil rights and political activists, Malcolm X, who was a political activist, Dr. Martin Luther King, who was a civil rights activist. Both of them have platforms on protecting Black women and this idea of marriage and family. It's in the world of hip hop music, right? Some hip hop artists and R&B artists talk about it. So we see it constantly. And then we're also told how women are supposed to be in marriages. And if we're not careful, if we keep telling women how they're supposed to be and we don't challenge that or question that, we end up taking on so much in these marriages that we do end up like Jada, going so long and forgetting who we are until everyone is grown and don't need us anymore. And then we're like, well, who am I? That's how, that's what I read when I saw the interview. Jada didn't know who she was. And that is a very common experience in many Black marriages. We don't talk about the strong Black woman.
Right.
Dr. Marsh.
So I just want to add a couple of points to that. Thank you, LaToya. And it's not just television, it is social media too, right? Because everybody wants to be able to show the pictures of their boo and them doing X, Y, and Z. So social media reinforces this whole notion about being partnered. But getting back to the notion of like marriage, and thinking about Jada in particular, I was talking to someone just the other day and I did a couple of interviews. I was saying, I'm not, everybody thinks because I study singlehood, they think that I'm anti-marriage, and I'm not anti-marriage at all. I think Black marriage is a beautiful thing. I think marriage is a beautiful thing, especially among Black Americans. But for me, I was like, any relationship that I get in, I want to be in that relationship and I want to be wanted. I do not want to be needed. Because to be needed means I got to do the emotional work for you that Dr. Chaney is talking about. I was like, everybody's got to do their own emotional work in the relationship, but people will find people and they will need people to do their emotional work. That's exhausting. I have my own emotional work that I have to do, and I'm going to do my own emotional work. You do your own emotional work, and then we will emotionally grow this relationship together. But people are in relationships because it's what they need. It fills the picture of what they think is respectable. So they get married or in these relationships, but they're not happy. Now, one of the points I have to get back to Pastor Hurd is because I've been doing these interviews the last couple of weeks, and I think it's important. And everywhere I go, I say this, and I'm indicting the Black church in some ways as well. We're talking about part of the reason why we're here is we're here because of COVID, and we're here because of the two global pandemics. We're sitting in the middle of police brutality as well, and racism in America, right? So people have a whole bunch to say about racism and the police in America. So they talk about how police officers are killing Black bodies. But it's a larger conversation beyond just race. It really is a conversation about power. So police officers are killing Black bodies. Any institution where there's a hierarchy of power, we have to have that conversation about power. Professors, for example, we have power over our students. Police officers kill Black bodies. Professors kill Black spirits. The Black church, as a hierarchical structure, you just said right now, they're in a power position, but they don't even give a second thought to a person that is single. We all need to think about power and how power plays into this conversation and the power dynamic in a marriage as well. But we've got to have a conversation that goes beyond just policing and racism, but power. And this is the time to have the conversation. If we're not careful, we'll miss this moment. And we don't want to miss this moment. So we got to start talking about power, especially in the Black church, and especially how they think about singles. Singles are automatically stigmatized in the Black church. Mm-hmm. Only thing they have for the Black, only thing y'all have for singles is how to stay safe or how to get married. But what if there's some people that just don't want to get married? Where do they go? What kind of conversation are they able to have? And again, I'm not saying that I'm anti-marriage, but if you look at the demographic literature, the reality is, and there's this thing called, there's a whole body of literature called educational homogamy, where you want to marry somebody on the same educational level as you. We know Black women are killing it at the educational level, so they're outperforming Black men. So if they want to marry comparable Black men, the numbers are just not there. If the numbers, that's not me, the numbers are just not there. If the numbers are not there, demographically, we know that there's more women than men. If you want to marry a Black man, because you can interracially marry, but we also know in the interracial literature is that if you do online dating, Black women are the most unattractive, the least picked on interracial dating sites or dating sites. We're less likely to get picked out of everybody, including Black men. There's a book that was written called Is Marriage for White People? Law professor Banks. And he said that, part of the problem is that women aren't willing to date outside of their race. If they were willing to date outside their race, we would see like different marriage patterns. And so the point was, he put the onus on Black women that we need to date outside of our race. But the reality is that the other men just don't find us attractive. They don't find us physically attractive. And they also fall into all these tropes about the strong Black woman, or she's too assertive, or she's too loud, or she's too hypersexual. So we got to have the conversation across the board. It's got to be a conversation across the board talking about these power dynamics. And what can you give singles? The ones that either can't get married because they're not willing to make these sacrifices. They're not willing to be in a relationship where they're needed. That's all they are, is a need versus a want. They're willing to draw their boundaries and say, I'm not crossing the boundaries. What does the Black church have for them? Not you, Georgie Hurt, but what does the Black church have for them?
Listen, I can't speak for Black people. I can't speak for men. I can't speak for Black church. But I do think that in my experiences, there is much legitimacy to what you just stated. And I think the only way that we can combat that is having conversations like this, because I believe what happens is these voices are not heard. The single and satisfied voices are not heard. The contentment is not heard. The need is not heard. It's sort of suppressed down. And other things take the forefront. You can argue the legitimacy of that. But certainly, I appreciate that point, and it's well taken. Professor Chaney, one of your students talked about you all just having this conversation in our chat here in your class. Tell us about the conversation that you had, and as it relates to television. And yes, and tell us your thoughts, your expertise on the subject.
I'm glad LaToya mentioned about the role of the media. I actually have a manuscript that's currently under review, and it's a content analysis of all of the television shows that have actually featured Black families. And starting with the first, with Amos and Andy, which I'm sure all of you know, actually started as a radio station, and eventually during the 1950s became a television show, all the way up to Blackish, which is actually, I think, the most recent one. LaToya mentioned, like, in terms of class differences. So you actually had James and Florida Evans on Good Times, and then you had the Cosbys during the 80s. One-on-One was actually was one of the exceptions, in that it featured a single Black father rearing his daughter, right? So that's one of the things I talked about in the discussion of that manuscript. A lot of the focus is on marriage in each of these shows. But this was one of the exceptions, in that it actually showed, it actually contradicted this very, very negative stereotype of African-American men being not present as fathers. But this was actually a situation where the mother actually went to pursue her own career goals, and the father actually assumed the responsibility of rearing his daughter. That show was like clearly an outlier, like in terms of what I look at. But even in terms of film media, I'm sure all of us are familiar with Why Did I Get Married? Why Did I Get Married To? I think very beautifully done. Because especially in the, they had this ritual of getting together, talking about why they even got married. In my work, I find that for a lot of couples, of course, in addition to love being one of the reasons, having children, of course, is definitely one of the reasons why they stay together. Finances is another reason, right? And especially now that we're in the middle of COVID, right? Mm-hmm. Folks that probably want to leave, they just cannot leave. Especially due to the very realistic kind of economic situation that a lot of couples are in. In the case with Will and Jada, a lot of people, like in kind of reading the blogs, they actually had the belief, well, they actually should just get divorced. That marriage just is a shambles. Both of their children are grown. They should just cut their losses and call it a day. But I'm of the opinion that really the couple is the foundation of the marriage. It's not the children. And Aisha Curry made this comment, I think it was several months ago, that she and her husband, Steph Curry, the basketball star, actually, they carve out date night separate and apart from their children. And she made the comment because, my husband and I, we're the foundation of this. I could not believe all of the negative comments, the onslaught of negative comments that came her way. People making comments like, well, what do you mean your children are the center of it all? But isn't the purpose of parenthood to rear your children to become adults so you can send them out into the world, right? And ideally, you would go back to the foundation on which you built your family. So in my opinion, it should not be children. That should actually be the only reason that couples actually remain together. But we have so many, I think, really strong celebrity examples of strong marriages. I know Jay-Z and Beyonce, they had a very, very public, right, situation with Jay-Z admitting that he had cheated on Beyonce, but they worked through it, right? They actually added to their family, and they seem to be stronger than ever. So I think one of the things I want couples to really take away from this is that, you can actually weather a storm that many people might think is difficult, right? You actually do the work and become stronger as a unit. But as Kris mentioned, you actually have to both set boundaries for yourself. I think it's more incumbent upon women because, right, there's so few women, so few Black women. The Black women that are in relationships might actually have this kind of pull in terms of getting what they want out of the relationship without sacrificing who they are. So it's a very, 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 very difficult balance that Black women actually have to navigate as they enter relationships and actually as they maintain relationships as well.
Wow, that was great. Dr. Marsh?
I just want to add in a couple of points. So one of the things I don't watch chick flicks. My sister loves them and she watches all of them. I don't watch any of them. Part of the reason why I don't is because I'm like in some ways kind of boycotting because I don't want to use a chick flick or I don't want to use television or I don't want to use film to determine what kind of relationship I should be in. I'm seeing two Black people in a relationship, but they're telling me what a relationship should be. And I need to figure out who I'm in a partnership with and how we define partnership. So we have to understand when we're watching TV and when we're watching film, that is entertainment. That is not reality. So you can't expect your relationship to look like that. You shouldn't want it to look like that. Any relationship is going to have hiccups. You're going to have ups. You're going to have downs. As long as you don't have those character flaws, you can work through them if that's what you all want to do. But it should not be, you're like, well, I want to be like Will and Jada. I want to be like Jay-Z and Beyonce. I want to be like, because we don't really know the whole story there. It's a beautiful story, but we don't know the whole story. And the people that are writing the story for media, for television and film don't really look like us. So now you're not looking like me and you're telling me how my relationship should be. And I measure my relationship against what writers are telling me a relationship should look like. The other thing, which is a great point that Dr. Chaney brought up that I wanted to bring up. I think Dr. Council had said this as well. So we're in the middle of COVID-19 and like economics is a part of it, a huge part of being in relationships and staying in relationships. But what we know from all the social science literature is that, children do best in a two-parent household because there is this division of labor. We make that a period, not a comma. There's another part to that. Children do best in a two-parent household, comma, if it's low conflict. If we're measuring any outcome for a child and it's a volatile relationship and there's high conflict, the child is going to do better in two separate single parent households than they're going to do in a collective household where all y'all doing is arguing and fighting, but staying together for the good of the children. That the children in situations like that don't do well. All of their outcomes are lower. So don't stay for the sake of the children, especially if it's a really volatile situation.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that and adding that on to it. I want to ask you all, because you're so profound, as you are dealing in this subject, as you're wrestling through these various topics. We brought up COVID-19, but we do understand that COVID-19 has brought with it some friends. civil unrest, political chaos, mental strain, economic uncertainty, all of which you have addressed at certain points. The Democratic nominee, former Vice President Joe Biden, has made this statement that he will have as his running mate. This is the hot topic in the political realm, a female. And then also being promulgated out is a woman of color, more specifically an African American woman. I just wanted to know, and Dr. Council, I'll start with you, your thoughts on hearing that. What should be some precautions there? How does that fit into or maybe being manipulated in this political season with that assertions floating around?
Yes. So the idea of having an African American woman as Joe Biden's running mate. So personally, I think that would be great. It would be great to see, right, like Black women in a position where, they'll be historic. Is the United States ready for it? I don't know, right? I still think that we need to address first this idea of mistreatment towards Black women, right? Like this not really respecting our humanity, because what I could see happening is the first time things go wrong, or if she's not the right skin tone, right? Because we should talk about colorism too, right, which is a big issue. If she doesn't fit certain things, how will she be received, and how will that impact her when she leaves the White House, right? I think about Michelle Obama. She wasn't even running for president. She was just Barack's wife. She's very powerful in her own right, but people treated her very nasty on the campaign trail, and she was very vulnerable about this in her book Becoming, right, where she spoke about people thinking she didn't like America because she grew up as a Black child in the United States. People calling her a monkey. Like, she experienced a lot of things, like talking about her body images. And I'm wondering, if you're going to have a Black woman as your running mate, are you as a white man going to stand up and make sure you too are not putting those strong Black woman controlling images on her and asking her to be the scapegoat for things that might go wrong? And is America going to apologize and recognize Black women's humanity? Because I find it hard to believe that we can accept a Black woman vice president if in our own individual lives, we don't even recognize Black women's humanity and respect our womanhood, as we too have feelings. We too need to be vulnerable, and we need people to show up for us, just like we're always asked to show up for everybody else.
Professor Chaney.
Excellent, LaToya. Excellent comment. As you were saying that, I thought about the football player, and I cannot, please guys, please remind me of his name. But he actually publicly made a comment on Twitter. Like, do you guys really think Jill Scott is attractive? I don't find her sexually appealing. Right? So this was kind of deducing this incredible Black woman that is extremely talented in music and film, right? She uplifts Black people in terms of social issues, and you're deconstructing her based on her sexual attractiveness to you, right? So I found it really interesting. The same person, like the day after, he wrote, which we know he didn't write it, the publicist wrote it clearly, right? But he's backtracking, and I had no right to say these things about this Black woman, and my own mother is Black. And that statement in itself was profound, because if you were comfortable in your own Blackness, if you actually loved the Black women in your circle, he would not have even made a comment like that to begin with. So going back to your comment in terms of your question is America ready for a vice president? I would have to wonder the same thing based on the historic treatment of Black women that has actually been common. It's something LaToya mentioned, something Michelle Obama went through when she was in office, but even now it's something that she's still going through. So if you go to the blogs and you read any comment that she's made on any particular issue, this is when the negative comments about her hatred of America. This is about her lack of, ability to really be fashionable in her clothes, her weight. All of these things are attacked. So I think the Black woman that actually comes into that position, should there be one, would actually have to have a very strong Afrocentric center, right? That Michelle Obama clearly has, because if you're going to step into the fire, right, you actually have to have this kind of fireproofness about you in terms of your mind, in terms of your focus, in terms of your spirit. But it would be interesting to see what will Joe Biden do. So during very, very heaty issues, I believe as president, should he be president, he should take on those issues himself, right? Because so it would have to take him having a clear understanding of the historical realities and images that LaToya already mentioned before, in terms of what Black women have actually had to carry. So him in that position, he should not add to her burden. If anything, if he were a really good president, he would actually remove a lot of that additional weight that she should not have to carry.
Absolutely. Dr. Marsh?
So this kind of gets back to the point that I was making. Well, America needs to get ready for a Black woman as the vice president. We should have been president by now as well. So they need to get ready. If they're not ready, they better get ready. But here's the point. Here's the point. And I appreciate Dr. Collins for her counsel, for her perspective. And I agree wholeheartedly. The one thing that I said earlier, and I really stand by this now, is like, okay, is Joe Biden picking a Black woman because he wants a Black woman to be his vice president, or because he needs a Black woman to be his vice president? Because those experiences are going to be very different if he needs her versus he wants her. If he wants her, he's going to shoulder some of that burden that Dr. Chaney is talking about. But if he needs her, it's going to be an abusive relationship that this vice president is going to be in. So that's the question I ask. Like, is it a want or is it a need?
And what do you think it is?
I think it's a need. I don't think he wants a Black woman. It's a need. And it's not necessarily needing the Black vote, because he got that. It's like he just needs to show that he's progressive. So because he needs to show he's progressive, he's going to put a Black woman in there. Now, is a Black woman capable? Any Black woman we know is going to be more than capable. That is not the question. But he needs her. And I guarantee you, if he does in fact pick a Black woman, it's going to be a challenging space for her to be in, because he needed her. And I doubt he'll be supportive of her the way in which Obama supported Biden.
Interesting. We can go deeper there, but I'll let it slide. Dr. Counsel.
I would say, just to follow up with that, and I think we need to continue to ask ourselves, do we need Black women or do we want Black women, right? Because every time we say we need Black women, we're perpetuating violence against Black women.
Absolutely.
At some level. And violence doesn't have to look like hitting in the face. Violence looks it crosses a continuum, right? That's one form of violence that we respect and know, but there's other forms of violence. So we really need to, I think that's a great point, when we need to ask ourselves, even in our interpersonal relationships, do we need Black women in our life or do we want Black women? And we need to move to wanting Black women in our life.
Right. And to dovetail with Dr. Counsel is saying, it's like, I talk to friends all the time. I'm like, a lie only hurts after the truth. A lie only hurts after the truth. To constantly lie to someone is violence. You're superimposing violence on that person every day. We'll take the truth over any lie. With my students, you ain't got to lie if you're going to come to the meeting because you don't have your dissertation chapter done. I'll talk to you, LaToya. I'm okay with that, but just don't lie to me. Do not lie to me, because now you are superimposing violence on me. You are inflicting violence on me. A lie only hurts. I mean, the truth only hurts after a lie. I said that right? Yeah. The truth only hurts after a lie. That's what I meant to say. The truth only hurts after a lie. You done lie. Now you want to come tell the truth. You could have told me the truth from the beginning. You wouldn't have me to deal with all that violence you put on me. Whatever it is. The truth only hurts after you lied about it.
Thanks for sharing that.
It may be bittersweet.
I got you.
The truth may be bittersweet. It may be bittersweet. I ain't saying the truth is easy. What I am saying is that only hurts after you don't lie to me. It ain't easy.
Professor Chaney, what we gonna do with her?
Truth only hurts after a lie. It's true.
Yes. Listen, you all have been so gracious with your time, and I want each of you to come back individually, talk about your work in the past. In fact, we need you at Sinai on different webinars and forums, and I'm going to connect you with Dr. Morrow, who's on our staff for behavioral health, to be able to have certain conversations like that, and certainly we want to be fair with your time and compensate you for your time on that. But it's such a critical issue. All right, Dr. Marsh, we know you about your money.
No. Real quick, I want to say this. Yeah. So now when black scholars that study race, we're in high demand. I was like, what you're not going to do is decide because of what's happening with these global pandemics we're sitting in. So what you're not going to do is just get free labor out of us. That's not what you're not going to do that. I'm not saying you, but people have called me to do stuff. And I'm like, well, we can't afford to pay you. And I'm like, okay, you got to give me something because my time is worth something. And if I don't say something, the women coming behind me are going to be exploited. So I'm like, no, you got to pay me something. So you can't exploit. You're exploiting our black bodies. That you're not going to do.
We're going to start with Professor Chaney. Give us any of your written work, your social media handle, how we can find you, how we can support you. Anything you want to promote or let us know about during this time. Don't be bashful. Go ahead. We'll start with you. Yes, please.
Yes. So I mentioned like the title of my book before is Police Use of Excessive Force Against African Americans, Historical Antecedents and Community Perceptions, Policing Perspectives and Challenges in the 21st Century. And it is a mouthful. But actually, as I mentioned before, this is something that my good friend and colleague Ray Robertson and I, who is actually at FAMU, we wrote this book, and it actually starts with how police brutality actually started right after slavery with the police patrols. Then we actually kind of moved through policing during the Jim Crow eras into Rodney King. To two more recent, analyses of police violence on Black bodies. I'm actually at, as I mentioned before, at Louisiana State University. My email is cchaney@lsu.edu. My Twitter is Professor Chaney at Twitter. And let me make sure of that because I do not use my Twitter as often as I normally do, but I'm also on Instagram as well. So if anyone would like to read any of my manuscripts, contact me at cchaney@lsu.edu. Again, I'm on Professor Chaney at Twitter and on Instagram as well.
Is the book out yet? Is the book
available? The book is
now?
out. In fact,
Amazon?
It was released last year.
Okay, it was released last year. Here's what we're gonna do for the first 25 people that email us at forthehurting@gmail.com. Let us know you want that book. First 25 people, give us your address in that email, forthehurting@gmail.com. First 25 people, we're going to get that book for free. If you add yourself to our mailing list and give Hurt for the Hurting any donation, you'll be prioritized on that first 25. So we're going to get 25 of those copies going out there for you. And then we'll also make sure when we publish this video, this interview, that your all your social media and your promotional information is on that as well. We appreciate you and thank you so much for joining us. Let's go to Dr. Counsel now. Let us know where we can find you And anything else that you want to promote during this time, is the floor is yours.
Yes, so I am a writer. Most of my work you can find on my Medium page at LaToya Council, LA capital TOYA COUNCIL. And you can follow me on Twitter at council_LaToya.
Thank you so much again for being with us today. It's been amazing. And we'll be looking to get back with each of you individually. Now, yes, Lord, here she is. Tell us about this book you working on. Tell us where we can find it. We saw the manuscript and all that other stuff. Come on, let us know.
Yes. So I'll hopefully be getting the book out to my publisher soon. If it's approved, it'll probably be coming out maybe this time next year. It's a long process. It'll be coming out with Cambridge University Press. I'm sure I'll be back online to talk with Pastor Hurt once the book is out. If you want to follow me on, social media, all my sites are Dr. Kris Marsh. That's DrKrisMarsh. And I just want to leave you with 3 points that I made, and I want to highlight those 3 points again. I am not anti-marriage. I think Black marriage is a beautiful thing, but understand why are you getting married? Think about if you are being wanted or needed, and always remember that the truth only hurts after a lie.
I'm glad you got that thing together, because you was everywhere. You was alive. When the truth comes, it's gonna bring the lie.
Yeah, this is my 13th call. This is my 13th call for
Kris. Kris, I'm gonna put that on my syllabus.
Girl, I'm like, right. Like, come on now, just come clean. Just come clean. And the truth, and the other thing is the truth never changes. If I ask you what you did New Year's Eve 2019, you should always be able to tell me. You don't have to be like, let me think about it. The truth never changes. The truth, you ask me 20 years from now.
You must be getting older, because I can't remember what I did yesterday. It ain't got nothing to do with it.
There's a difference between what did I do yesterday? Like, there's a difference between what did I do yesterday and what did I tell you I did yesterday?
There is a difference in that. Now you talking.
Look, this is my 12th call I've been on today. I gave up caffeine this morning, and I'm like, I am struggling. I got it together.
So,
you get the premise. If you lie first, then you tell the truth, it doesn't matter. It's pointless. It's a moot point. Just lie. Just out the gate, and we're good.
Gotcha. Listen, I'm gonna get off live, but I want to talk to y'all briefly about something. Let me whisper a word of prayer to our listeners out there that may be hearing this and they're trying to mesh it all together in their mind. They're in a unhealthy spot with their own self, and they want to take this information. We want to pray God for wisdom for them. And certainly we praise God for the intellect that we just experienced here with these three young ladies. Father, thank you for this opportunity. We pray blessings upon your people that are listening. Certainly, Lord, that everything will be done in a way, because you're perfect and every good thing come from you, that you would be the founder and finisher of all things in their life. It's for Jesus' sake we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, thank y'all for listening. Share this page. Look out for tomorrow. Dr. Jeremy Everett will be here with us to talk about his feeding program. Next week, Monday, Money Matters Monday, we have some great guests. We confirm Mark J. Kwan, who wrote Rich Man, Poor Bank, and also 10 Ways to Avoid Taxes. He'll be here. We got 100 copies of his book that for those that make a donation of any amount, we'll give away to. If you want Professor Chaney book, let us know. Matter of fact, take off the 25 limit. Let us know. We're going to get it. Make sure you have that important work to add intellect to the conversation, which all of us are talking about. God bless you. Thank you again for listening.